Mr. Speaker, we are here for the 2016 budget. And before I begin, I wish to congratulate warmly the Honorable Minister of Finance and his staff and indeed the staff of all the ministries who would have had to work a little bit harder to get us 2 budgets in 6 months. And I wish to offer them warm congratulations. I am aware that many of them will leave this room disappointed because they didn't get what they want and astounded because of what they see in the budget. But nevertheless, sir, we are grateful. We are grateful for their tireless efforts over and over again. Mr. Speaker, this is about 9 months since the new government is in place. Enough time, I believe, with being on the jobs daily, and certainly they believe so, given that they've paid themselves handsomely, to understand fully what is happening in the country. Enough time to be able to garner where we are, where we were, where we want to go, and how to get us there. And so this is the budget that I believe could characterize this particular new government. And this period, sir, before I actually begin on the budget, I think it's my duty to note for this Honorable House what many of us in here already know. This period has been characterized by disappointment and sadness, by heavy-heartedness, by disillusionment, by lost opportunities. The lost opportunity to fulfill promises so passionately made just 9 months ago. Lost opportunity to treat teachers the way you told them they should be treated. Give them massive increases. Lost opportunity to fulfill promises like make massive increases in the old age pensions. Lost opportunity to really show how a country could go forward using the best talents, irrespective of how people voted. Lost opportunity to show youth that they matter in decision making. I mean, we only have to look across from us to understand how very distrusted young people of this country are. And then we read the budget, where the budget it says young people are not prepared for leadership. Mr. Speaker, this has caused great disappointment in this land, and that is unfortunate. We see from Dr. Jeffrey, I believe, Henry Jeffrey, commenting in the Starbuck News, former member of this House, now a lecturer, I believe, and commentator in the Starbuck News, he said, "I bet the bottom dollar that a substantial number of those who wanted to see the PPPC out of government and supported the coalition are now extremely disappointed with the performance of the latter." And as can be expected, the popular refrain will be, "Is not ours, are you sending home?" Without listening. Another characteristic of the 9 months is we time, we say so, it will be so, and we don't have to listen to anyone. Sir, I wish to read the words of a young, prolific writer, Sarah Barrett. And she titled her piece, "It is Time." It is time. Something that was very associated with the green and yellow campaign of the APNUAFC. And here's what she said. This is a champion of change. 9 months ago, she was a champion of change, and I have to say, in fairness to her, I got the impression she was a champion of change of the culture of our politics and where we were. And this is what she said, sir. I can't read the whole thing, but I invite everybody to go read it. "Our country is small and our people are inescapably connected. I believe that last May we began the fight to take Guyana back, to give her the sort of grooming she deserved these past 50 years. And then she writes of her disappointment and her disillusionment. And it is our time that is destroying our country. And she concludes like this. "They told us that it is time, and they were right. It is time to see them for what they really are. To see that they were never sincere and they cannot forgive. It is time to see that hate and bitterness drive them in a power struggle that robs us of our lives and our time, things that can never be returned. Your champion of change. Reflecting the feelings of disappointment of so many in our land. You could have changed this. Mr. Speaker, outside of that, I was looking at the budget to see what is the policy framework within which this government is going to function. One would think that at least the manifesto promises and the promises made on the campaign trail would inform what that policy would be. I haven't seen anything written. I haven't seen what framework is there. When we were elected into office in 1992, we said very clearly what we wanted to do. We want to reduce poverty. We want to make democratic norms and practices the order of the day rather than something to long for. We want to make sure that all our people can benefit from the goods of our land. And I could go through all our policies, sir. Education, making access to education expanded, housing the population, providing better health services. Everything that was built up over the years can be marked by the indicator of the World Bank. In 1991, the World Bank did a study on poverty on us, and they said that 61% of our people, around 61%, were living in poverty. That's out of every 100 persons, 61% were living in poverty in 1991 under the PNC government, the party that makes up the most of the APNU AFC government. Mr. Speaker, they did a study again on us in 2008, and they said Guyana had reduced poverty to 35%, had cut poverty in half. So we saw there was a policy focus, there was a framework, all our things and our programs were done within this framework, and here is the indicator, and that's almost 10 years ago. I'm absolutely sure this new government took over a better reduction in the poverty levels. In the absence of something clear, Mr. Speaker, about what policy this government is pursuing, we're left with the measures in this budget. And what are some of them? Bans on the importation of cars older than 8 years old, which will cause at least 80% of the people who bought cars last year not to be able to afford cars this year. Bans on the importation of tires that would quadruple the cost of tires. The category of persons who bought cars last year would not be able to buy cars this year. That means the mothers and fathers within a particular economic bracket, 80% who bought cars last year, had they postponed their purchase to this year, would be without transportation and probably relying on the bikes and buses. And effectively, ban on the importation of used tires, charging less on rum, assertions that home owners, women, families, their homes will be repossessed, assertions that rice is not government's business and is a private sector enterprise undeserving of government assistance, $1,200 for pensioners, $800 for poor people who are receiving public assistance, $1 million salaries for their ministers, new fees for licenses, removal of the WOW program, removal of the Because We Care cash grant program. From what is said in the budget and what is not said in the budget, I think we can garner what is the framework, what is the intent of this government. It is to make themselves comfortable, to live life large, while they neglect the persons who depend on them for service. And I think we can get a good summation of what the budget is. It came from no less a person than the honorable member of the government side, Mr. Odwin Rutherford, when he said this is not a poor people's budget. This is not a poor people's budget. He said that. And Mr. Speaker, if we were confused, then we heard from the other side, almost every speaker in the backbench, this inane repetition of nothing happened under the previous government, and that this budget was a fresh approach. And I understand why Mr. Jaipal Sharma, the honorable member, was confused. How could it be a fresh approach, and how could nothing have happened if so many programs, let's take the education sector, everything listed in here is a repetition of what we had 2 years ago. 2 years ago. That's not fresh. We announced it in this house 2 years ago. We negotiated the money for many of the programs that you're now calling fresh. How could it be that there was nothing in the budget? Mr. Speaker, having taken almost wholesale from the last budget, from the PPPC's programs, all that is now in education. The education budget is easy to support. Of course, we have complaints about the things that were left out. What we have a quarrel with, Mr. Speaker, is that they didn't take the PPPC's programs holistically, and you always have problems when you plagiarize a piece and leave out a piece. And that's why in school they warn you and caution you not to copy, because you could copy wrong. And so, sir, we have the nice fancy schools that I'll talk about just now. We have the nice fancy schools for our children, and we have the training of teachers, and we have the improvement of our literacy and numeracy standards. But so we're giving our children what the PPPC wanted to give them as far as education is concerned. But we've removed from their parents, by some of these measures, we've removed from their parents the ability to look after those children. So you took our education program and you're going to build a house, a school, but you took away from the parents of all those children from Wales, 1,700 of them, the ability to put breakfast on the table before they go to school. You are taking away from the single parents who were relying on WOW. What is WOW? WOW is a loan that was being given to single parents at a low interest rate without the requirement for collateral. You're taking and we were recognized by the BBC for this program. You're taking away, and you know, I'm hearing the moronic refrain.
I remember you did not say that. You will withdraw it right away.
Sir, did you hear anything?
I heard you say moronic. It's not a word to be used in this chamber. The first one was inane. I let it pass. Please, we cannot keep doing this. Would you withdraw that and then proceed?
Your Honor, it was a heckle. I didn't think we were paying attention to heckles, but, Your Honor, there's an attempt to...
Say that last evening, the honourable member and Minister of Social Protection said that the WOW program has been restored. So for a member to stand here and say that it has been taken away, having heard that last night, would not be correct, please. That is the point of order, that it is palpably wrong to make a statement like that, having heard Minister last night.
Honourable Member, I thank you. I await the withdrawal of the term that you ought not to have used, Honourable Member.
I withdraw the term, sir.
And
Mr. Speaker.
I will ask all honourable members not to indulge, however much the temptation is great, to use epithets.
Such as hoodwink, sir?
Thank you. I beg your pardon, ma'am?
I was wondering, sir, such as hoodwink? You don't want us to use things like hoodwink?
Please
I
proceed.
could refrain from using hoodwink, sir.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, we heard something mumbled as a heckle in this National Assembly about how many of the loans were bad. You don't quash a program because you can't manage the program. You fix it. and you manage it. The program was always at risk because of the nature of the program. Offering collateral-free loans to anyone carries with it a risk that there will be low repayment if there is not serious monitoring. We are talking about single-parent women who are trying to look after their children. But let's not get distracted from what I was saying. I was saying you've put the fact that you're going to build our school in here, but you've taken away from parents their ability to send their children to school. And so, Mr. Speaker, you said to our rice farmers and their children that you're not going to invest in rice. Rice is not government's business, and that the rice is going to be treated as a private sector enterprise. The people in this National Assembly who are honorable ministers of the government were able to pay themselves more than twice what the other government people were using based on the contributions of rice farmers over the years. That is how you got the money to pay yourself. That is how you got the money to pay yourself. That is how we were able to take our country to this point. And when there's a sector in trouble, sir, whether for rice price, for markets and so on, the responsible thing to do is to step in and help that sector. Help the people of the sector. They're not asking for $1 million a month or $1.7 million a month, but they're asking for some relief in diesel, some relief in fertilizers, some guidance. They'd like to see the Minister of Agriculture, a small thing like that. Never saw him. People are wondering if the honorable member was ever in a rice field. These are some of the real issues people want to talk about. Mr. Speaker, in the education, budget, Mr. Speaker, we heard that there's going to be, the big ticket items are the SCIP program. That is the Secondary Education Improvement Program. Mr. Speaker, I wish to bring to the attention of the National Assembly that in the budget debates of 2014, at paragraph 4.74, this is what Dr. Ashley Singh says. Moreover, we will commence implementation of a $10 million universal secondary education initiative, which will facilitate the construction of new schools and provision of materials for improved teaching techniques and technology-assisted learning in mathematics. Our teacher training college will continue to offer, etc., etc. In 2014, we announced this program in the 2014 budget. By 2016, had we been in office, we would have been coming with new things. You come in 2016, 2 years later, and bring as a fresh idea, and as the Minister of Finance says, a new initiative, a program we began in 2014. 2014, stagnated. It's a stagnation budget. 2014 items being brought up to 2016. What was in that program? To take us to a closer place where we could have universal secondary education. And there were programs built in. For example, there are to be 4 new secondary schools. Most of them with 1,000-person capacities, state-of-the-art science labs, and all the works. One was supposed to be at Good Hope on the East Coast, and I hope we have not changed this in the new philosophy of paying off political investors. There was supposed to be one at Good Hope, there was supposed to be one at Parfait Harmony, there was supposed to be one on the highway, and these schools would be schools that would allow us to get closer to universal secondary education. This is the program that the minister boasted about, a good program, where teachers would be trained further to deal with mathematics and English and the STEM subjects. This is the program. This is the program where grade 8 students will get, more than 800 students, the tablets that the minister spoke about. This is the program that would allow for us to have better improved grades at mathematics and English. This is what the Honorable Minister spoke about. This is our program from 2014. We support it fully. It's a good program. What we're asking you to do is innovate and come up with ideas and come up with good plans for Guyana. Do not be lazy and copy what we did. Come up with things that will complement what we have already done. The next big ticket item in the budget was the, Mr. Speaker, that is being touted as new, is the Early Childhood Education Program. The Early Childhood Education Program, where we're looking to put, and they call it a new approach, shamelessly, sir. Shamelessly. This, Mr. Speaker, I turn the House's attention to 2014, a publication by a national newspaper, the Guyana Times. This is what it said. Education Minister Priya Manickchand with Global Partnership for Education Board Chair Julia Gillard. And there was a photograph. The Education Ministry has announced that at the last meeting of the Board of Directors, on which Education Minister Priya Manickchand sits as a director, representing Latin America and the Caribbean, the Global Partnership for Education approved a $1.7 million education grant for Guyana. And I'm hearing the comments about who wrote the article. Here's what Julia Gillard said. We want to question that. This is critical. This is the former Prime Minister of Australia, who is now the chairperson of the board for the Global Partnership for Education. This is critical funding at a time when 58 million children of primary school age are not in school. Guyana has earned this because it was to be an addition to all the good works we were doing. Guyana, presently, we left the APNU government with an 8 to 5% enrollment in nursery education, which is the highest in the Commonwealth Caribbean. Coming back, sir, coming back and telling us that you have an early childhood education program and shamelessly calling it a fresh approach and new government is a stagnation move. Mr. Speaker, what I would have liked to hear from the Finance Minister is, given that the donor funding for education has been reduced by 10% or more by now from 2010, how are we going to make sure our education funding, which used to be 5% under the PNC, that has been moved to between 14 and 17% under the PPP, that has continued under this government, how are we going to sustain the growth we have made and even go further? That's what I'd like to hear, sir. Not repackage what we had and come here and tell me it's a fresh approach. This is stagnant. It is stagnant. It is doing what we did 2 years ago. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to find out from, and the other items, uniform for children, done by the PPP. In fact, sir, done far more effectively than is being done now. The last year budget, as was mentioned by the previous speaker on my side, the last year budget has still not been implemented. There are children all over the hinterland regions who have seen the faces of ministers who went there to shake hands and distribute colors, but have not been given their uniforms. So they're given boots and slippers, the BS program, sir. Boots and slippers, but they can't go to school without their school uniform. So they've been given the boots and the slippers, but they can't go to school without a uniform, and they haven't been given that. That went back. That went back. The school feeding program, sir. The school feeding program, which is again repeated in the budget as though it's a fresh issue, fresh intervention, is something that was started by the PPPC government. The extension of the 7,000 new children who are going on the program is in the strategic plan that was left at the Ministry of Education. It was bringing the children who were off the program onto the program. And what is frightening, sir, is that this program was copied without people understanding the philosophy of the program. And so what we had was not only a program that kept our children filled on nutritious meals, but it was a program that provided employment for the village, people in the village, either by the making of the peanut butter or the making of the cassava bread. What we have now, sir, is bringing over from Brazil for many of the schools, an importation from Georgetown, that biscuit with the cream in the middle. Absolutely no nutrition. And it would be interesting to learn who they're buying some of that from. Are they repaying this political investment we heard about? Because they have totally failed to grasp the import of the program for the village economy. And may I say, sir, that this is a program that was recognized globally as a model, for how governments in developing countries can do several things with the same funding. Feed children, develop skills in a community, provide employment, etc. And so when this copying is being done, we are available. We are available to come and explain to you why we came up with something and why it's important that it stays the same way. Mr. Speaker, disappointment was for, again, this is the same APNU AFC government that said on the campaign trail the education system is in tatters, everything is, yes sir?
I remember you have 5 minutes more.
Mr. Speaker, can I at the same time ask that the honourable member have her 5 minutes plus her 5 minutes extension as agreed, sir? Thank you.
I thank the honourable member. Honourable member, you speak for 35 minutes.
Thank you very much, sir. We heard that everything was in tatters and these things were bad. If everything was in tatters, this adoption wholesale of our program really makes a lie out of that claim, because we're doing the exact same thing what we did. But outside of that, sir, we heard that there was going to be a commission of inquiry. It's now 9 months. None has been appointed, no work has been done, and as a result of that, we have major things stalled up. For example, the policy, the strategic plan that we left in place, that is waiting on this elusive commission of inquiry before they finalize that. That plan did not come about by magic. It was consulted on all across this country by stakeholders, and it identifies what is wrong in the sector and what is needed in the short and medium term to fix it. And so that is what the commission, I understand, is going to do. But if the commission is so important, then get cracking with it. Stop this delay. We've seen audits where they think it's important. Is education not important? Is that why we have not had the commission as yet? I call on the government to lay the education bill. The Education Act in this country was not amended for over 100 years. Let's lay the education bill. Bring it up to a place where it can meet the needs of the Guyanese children. And this constant refrain of why you didn't do that. It was tabled in this house, sir. It was not, and I believe it was sent to a special select committee. But it doesn't matter, even if we didn't bring it. The day before we brought the Sex Offences Act, we did not have a Sex Offences Act. The day before we started a school feeding program, we didn't have a school feeding program. In other words, governing is not about collecting for yourself. It is about progressing for the country.
Why you didn't pay the 74?
Mr. Speaker, there's this constant, sir, the teacher salaries. The teacher 5-year agreement is at an end as of 31st of December. Teachers were promised a significant increase. They've got none. If you can't give the teachers their increase, then at least give them the duty-free concessions that they earned under the previous government. We left 30 agreed upon duty-free concessions for 30 teachers, and those have been held up. And I understand after we left office, after the APNU AFC came into office, We saw there were 46 more approved. None have been given. Give the teachers their duty-free concession. Mr. Speaker, there is urgent need for there to be some sort of collaboration between the public education system and the private education system as an enterprise. Those children in the private schools are our Guyanese children, and the staff and the professional